Because this movie wasn't weird enough already, it's about to get a whole lot weirder.
Don't got no problem.
No problems.
Ain't got no suitcase.
No suitcase.
These creatures have a disturbing habit of pulling off their own body parts for fun, which had to have been a logistical nightmare for the puppeteers. And yeah, I know this was obviously done with a green screen and it's not totally convincing, but really with how complex this scene is, they did the best they could with what they had to work with at the time. They are also one of the first stuffed animals you see in Sarah's room. Also, my fellow Red Dwarf fans will never let me hear the end of it if I don't mention that one of them is voiced by Danny John Jules. Going by what I've read, I think it's this one.
Like the man said, don't lose your head.
Sounds a little like the cat.
There's a wise old cat saying, which I think applies in this situation. It goes, what are you talking about, dog breath?
I have to admit, this part was a little too intense for me when I was a kid. Really, the whole scene was borderline, but that bit with the eyes, yikes. So they start playing catch with their heads and decide they want to do the same with Sarah's head. What a weirdo, her head isn't removable. Sarah has had enough, so she just starts pulling off their heads and throwing them and using that as a distraction to get away.
It's against the rules to throw other people's heads!
Yo, you're only allowed to throw your own head!
Yeah, that's right.
Come on!
There's actually kind of a telling line here.
Hey, don't you want to look like us?
That makes me think that these creatures were originally people who got lost in that forest and became them, and now they want to turn Sarah into one too. Though I could be reading too much into that, it could just be about how they want to pull her head off.
You want to take your head off, don't you?
Damn, those things just get more and more creepy and disturbing as this scene goes on. By the way, people like to refer to this scene as a big-lipped alligator moment. And I disagree. Everything that happens to Sarah is set up by Jarrett to slow her down. She was led there and separated from Ludo for a reason. It's a weird scene, yeah, but not without purpose.
She does.
Grab it!
Anyway, Hoggle to the rescue! Which results in her kissing him and, well, Jarrett makes good on his threats because guess where they end up?
The bog of eternal stench.
I never smelled anything like it. It's like...
Yeah, that's gross. Well, now we know where Ludo went to. So they come across a bridge, but it's guarded.
Stop! Stop, I say!
That's Sir Didymus, who is another plushie in Sarah's room.
Now bad.
Stench? Of what speakest thou?
Smell!
I smell nothing.
I guess it's possible to get used to even that smell. Unless his sense of smell isn't as good as he says. Or he just has really weird taste. So a scuffle breaks out between him and Ludo, and Hoggle uses the distraction to sneak away. So these two continue fighting for a while, and it's pretty goofy for the most part. Though some dark music starts up. And the first time I saw this, I really thought Ludo was going to accidentally kill Sir Didymus, which I think is the point. Considering this happens.
Enough!
Fortunately, Sir Didymus is fine.
Now I, Sir Didymus, yield to thee. Come, let us be brothers henceforth, and fight for the right as one.
And now they're friends, and Sarah's group gains a new member.
Wait a minute! You forget my sacred vow, my lady.
However, he still can't let them cross the bridge.
No one shall pass this way without my permission.
Wow, it's gonna take a lot to get through this one.
May we have your permission?
Well, Yes?
Yeah, apparently no one has ever just asked him before.
Have no fear, sweet lady. This bridge has lasted for 1,000 years.
That's not very encouraging. So Ludo summons rocks for her to stand on.
My brother, canst thou summon up the very rock?
Sure, rock's friends.
And that's as close as we get to an explanation for that. And now, random fart humor. It is what it is. And it turns out that Sir Didymus has a steed. I probably don't even have to point it out, but that's Sarah's dog from the beginning of the movie. Wow, that is just ridiculously cute.
Let's get out of here.
Yeah, really.
I wouldn't do that if I were you.
Poor Hoggle, he doesn't want to do anything bad to Sarah, but he's too afraid of Jarrett not to. Plus, everyone is starting to get hungry, so that's the perfect time to give Sarah that peach that Jarrett gave him.
Thank you!
Look at Hoggle's reaction. He can't even watch her bite into it.
It tastes strange.
Remember, he doesn't actually know what it's going to do.
It ain't gonna hurt the little lady, is it?
Oh, now why the concern?
For all he knows, he just poisoned her.
Hoggle, what have you done?
Oh, damn you, Jarrett. And damn me, too.
And then she starts tripping balls. Get it? 'Cause crystal balls. Eh. And there's the music box from her bedroom. It even played the tune from this song in the beginning. Suddenly she's at some kind of weird masquerade where she spots Jarrett and tries to pursue him, but he keeps disappearing.
There's such a sad love deep in your eyes, it kind of held you.
It's interesting to note that the dancers are all basically humans dressed as goblins. I love that Jarrett has blue in his hair to match his costume. That's a nice touch. Jarrett gets all the ladies. Are any of us really surprised? She eventually catches up to him, and this kind of G-rated seduction takes place.
Wasn't too much fun at all.
If you ignore the subtext, it comes across as quite romantic. Until it gets disturbing. This is turning into a bad trip. When she sees the clock and realizes that she only has 1 hour left to save Toby, she realizes what's going on and gets away. Obviously that's a CG chair, but I kind of like the semi-fake look of it since this was all a hallucination anyway. She wakes up in a heap of trash and accidentally leans on another heap of trash that is part of someone.
Why don't you look where you're going, young woman?
Sarah now seems to have memory loss and only remembers that she was looking for something.
Well, look here.
Lancelot?
Lancelot was also earlier in the movie. Just kidding.
Cute.
That's what you were looking for, wasn't it, my dear?
Yes. I forgot.
So Sarah is led into a room that turns out to be her bedroom.
Oh. It was just a dream. I dreamed it all, Lancelot.
First time I saw this, I thought the movie was gonna end there. It was all a dream? What a cop-out.
Better to stay in here, dear. Yes, there's nothing you want out there. No. Oh, no.
I like to think that this lady really exists and can only be seen by people who are predisposed to becoming shut-ins and hoarders. So the junk lady, as I guess she's called, throws all the cool things in Sarah's room at her to distract her from what she's actually trying to accomplish. Again, I wonder if this is another case of creatures who live in the labyrinth who were once human, like maybe she's trying to turn Sarah into one of her kind.
I fought my way here to the castle, beyond the Goblin City.
But she also has the playbook, and that's what jogs her memory.
Don't you like your toys?
It's all junk.
Or it begins to. What clinches it is seeing the music box again.
I have to save Toby!
Causing the room to collapse and her to get out to where her friends are waiting.
Dollar back.
Milady, look, we're almost there. Those are the gates to the Goblin City.
We must go quietly.
Open up right now.
Sir Didymus really is like a small dog.
I shall fight you all to the death. And I shall fight anyone, anywhere, any place, any time.
Seriously, this is the best representation of small dog syndrome I've ever seen in an anthropomorphic canine. So they nearly get into the Goblin City, but this happens.
What is that?
I love how creative this movie is, even if a lot of the creative stuff doesn't make much sense. Hell, it's because it doesn't make much sense.
Watch out!
Why did he make a sound like a horse? And surprisingly, it's Hoggle to the rescue. Holy shit, he totally throttled that poor little guy. Go Hoggle. And now he and Sarah have their little moment, and he's forgiven by everyone.
Well, what are we waiting for? Huh? Let's get that rat who calls himself Jarrett.
Random kitty. Meanwhile, just look at the facial expressions and body language between these two. That's freaking adorable. Anyway.
Stop her!
So word gets back to Jarrett that she made it into the Goblin City and he's not happy.
She must be stopped! Do something!
And a battle breaks out. On one hand, there are a ton of cool looking characters in this scene. On the other, I actually feel like it runs a little too long. It definitely has some cute moments though, mostly involving Sir Didymus. Anyway, Ludo summons rocks and it's all over.
Hey, no problem.
That could have been really gory if handled realistically. I love this bit of triumphant music here. So they've made it into the castle and Sarah realizes that she's almost out of time. So she makes the decision that she has to face Jarrett alone and says goodbye to her friends.
But should you need us?
Yes. Should you need us?
Aww. And then she ends up here. Again, there's an M.C. Escher painting in her room.
How you turned my world, you precious thing.
This must have been interesting to film.
I move the stars for no one.
Yeah, I think Jarrett has pretty much had it with her by this point.
Your eyes can be so cruel.
This song is really interesting and it kind of tells us a lot about Jarrett. At this point, he knows he's losing. At first, he seems angry.
Everything I've done for you.
But his voice gets softer until he just sounds sad.
Love without your heartbeat.
He isn't normally a sympathetic villain, but he definitely has his moment here. Yeah, silly as it may be with how awful he's been up to this point, I actually kind of feel bad for him. And Sarah pretty much just ignores him and goes right after Toby. And even takes a leap of faith to get to him. And now it's time for Jarrett's last stand. I like how he's wearing white with feathers here to remind us that he sometimes takes the form of a white owl. I have to say that the yellow makeup is kind of unflattering though. Even David Bowie can't quite pull that off.
I have been generous up until now, but I can be cruel.
Generous? What have you done that's generous?
He entertained your brat of a brother for one.
Everything. Everything that you wanted, I have done. I have turned the world upside down, and I have done it all for you. I am exhausted from living up to your expectations.
I love how he's basically saying, what more do you want from me? And in a way, he's right. He gave her everything she wanted. All the stuff in her room that she loves, he made it a reality because she wanted it. And now that she has it, she's casting it aside, and he doesn't understand why.
For my will is as strong as yours. And my kingdom.
There's a certain phrase he does not want her to say.
And my kingdom is great.
I ask for so little.
You can tell who is in control here, even if she doesn't realize it yet.
Just fear me. Love me. Do as I say, and I will be your slave.
She's a lot stronger than I would be. Here it comes.
You have no power over me.
Aw, that face he made. Interesting bit of symbolism there. The crystal that was showing her her dreams just popped like a bubble because she rejected it. And of course, Jarrett admits defeat and leaves.
Toby?
Now she's back home and Toby is safe in his bed. That kid's had a long day. And he gets the bear for his trouble.
I'd like Lancelot to belong to you now.
Sarah goes back to her room and starts putting her stuff away because she realizes it's time to grow up. But her friends show up to say goodbye.
Should you need us, for any reason at all.
I need you, Huggle, every now and again in my life. For no reason at all.
Well, why didn't you say so?
Then this happens. Party in Sarah's room. I feel the need to point out something because I think people tend to misinterpret this scene. She's acting like she's ready to grow up, and then her imaginary friends show up, and it's like she instantly regresses. But really listen to what she says here.
Every now and again in my life. For no reason at all. I need you.
Every now and again. I think she was ready to grow up, and she still is, but she realizes that a bit of escapism sometimes is still necessary. Yeah, maybe the movie could have been more clear about it, but it's a good lesson regardless. Jarrett is so done with all of this.
You remind me of the babe. Babe with the power.
What power?
Power of voodoo. You do. Remind me of the babe.
The end. So that was Labyrinth. This is still one of my favorite movies of all time. The sets are beautiful, the costumes are beautiful, David Bowie is beautiful, the music is amazing, it's cute and funny, but it's also pretty dark and intense sometimes. It's relatively kid-friendly, well, it's the 80s version of kid-friendly, where it gets a lot more leeway than a kid-friendly film these days would get. In fact, the dark parts are so dark I used to watch it on Halloween before I got into horror movies. But anyway, it's not so kiddie that adults can't enjoy it too. Speaking of which, there's an underlying theme to this movie about growing up. Sarah is right at that awkward age where she's too old to be a kid and too young to be an adult, and naturally she's hesitant to take that step. She's also very deeply into her form of escapism, which is just about anything from the fantasy genre. Notice that on her bookshelf is The Wizard of Oz and Alice in Wonderland, both of which are about a girl in the real world stumbling into a fantasy world, and her adventures therein. It's basically what she wanted, to escape the real world and leave her responsibilities behind. But once that actually does happen to her, she finds that she can't escape her responsibilities after all. In the end, she realizes that she needs to grow up and sadly starts putting her things away. But it ends with her realizing that escapism is okay once in a while. It's a nice bit of symbolism when you really get down to it. A lot of us can relate to this character. You don't have to be a girl, but if you've ever watched The Wizard of Oz and Alice in Wonderland and thought, even on a subconscious level, I want to be that girl, I want to go on those adventures and be around all that cool fantasy stuff. Well, Sarah is that girl, and Labyrinth is really kind of a more modern take on those stories. And speaking of characters, I didn't mention this during the movie segment because I was afraid it would take too long and derail the narrative too much. Jarrett shows up in Sarah's room as well. There are a couple of pictures on her mirror of a woman who is apparently Sarah's mom standing next to a man who looks like David Bowie. And there's a statue of a figure that looks like Jarrett next to the mirror. So that begs the question, why does everything in her room show up later in the Labyrinth? It's tempting to think that Jarrett did that. He's seen everything that she loves and tries to lure her in with it. But if Jarrett is one of those things, what exactly is behind all this? Maybe Jarrett existed already as something else. Maybe this owl is his default form. And when he conjured up this world, he himself took the form of the thing she appears to love the most out of all the things in her room. The statue is in plain view whenever she's sitting at her vanity table. Presumably she put it there because she loves to look at it. That actually would kind of explain why he's an owl in only the beginning and the end of the movie. I don't know, just me speculating, but it's interesting that the movie doesn't reveal how any of this works. I mean, in The Wizard of Oz, all of the friends that Dorothy makes in Oz all look like her friends from the real world. But that's because it was a dream the whole time, so people who were familiar to her showed up in said dream. Alternately, Sarah could have imagined all this, and that's why everything in the Labyrinth is familiar. Speaking of Sarah, if there's one thing I might nitpick, it's that Sarah kind of regards everything with dull surprise. To be fair, like her character, Jennifer Connelly was only 15 during the filming of this movie, and it was only her second starring role in anything. Not to mention that she had to react to puppets whose voices were coming from somewhere behind her, and that's a little hard to get used to. Even David Bowie had problems with that early on, though it doesn't show in the finished product. If you like this movie, I highly recommend checking out the feature-length documentary called Inside the Labyrinth. It was made during the filming of Labyrinth, and there are interviews with Jim Henson and David Bowie, among others. It's great seeing the behind-the-scenes stuff, and David Bowie has some interesting insight into his character.
one feels that he's rather reluctantly inherited the position of being Goblin King. And he runs the whole place as well as he can. And he's kind of spoiled. He gets everything his own way. The goblins, without his command, have just gone off and taken another baby brother.
That awkward moment when the goblins keep bringing you babies you don't want. Also, practically the whole look of this movie, from the goblins to the costumes, was designed by artist Brian Froud, who is well known for drawing mythological creatures. He was also involved in The Dark Crystal and The Storyteller. And because I know people are going to bring up The Dark Crystal in the comments, I did see it when it was first on TV. I don't think I've seen it since, but I know I need to watch it again. Anyway, speaking of Brian Froud, the baby was played by his son Toby Froud. Also, Dr. Crusher did the choreography for this movie.
1, 2.
And I like a picture to have a sense of substance. I like it to be about life. And so I think that's what we were trying to do with this film, is trying to do a film that would make a difference to you if you saw it.
But sadly, for all the blood, sweat, and tears that went into this movie, it pretty much bombed at the box office. To put it in perspective, even adjusting for inflation, it bombed harder than Catwoman. There is no justice in the world. Jim Henson was generally a pretty happy and positive guy, but friends of his have said that after Labyrinth bombed, he became as close to depressed as anyone had ever seen him. Of course, Labyrinth became a cult classic. For a brief time years ago, I joined a LiveJournal community for goths, and I was surprised at how many of them named Labyrinth as their favorite movie. This was a movie that I had to introduce my friends to when I was a kid because none of them had heard of it. Now suddenly I was finding other people who already knew about it. And these days it seems to be all over the internet. There's finally merchandise, and there's even a Labyrinth masquerade ball held in Los Angeles every year. Which is great, it definitely deserves attention. I have to say, though, that it makes me a little sad to think that Jim Henson didn't live to see that. I think I read somewhere that he was aware that the movie had a cult following, but since he died in 1990, he really didn't get to see the full realization of it. And that's kind of a shame. Oddly enough, though, there was an NES game based off of it. And even more oddly, it was Japan exclusive. Go figure. Admittedly, I have not played this game a whole lot, but my first impressions aren't that great. But first of all, credit where it's due, they do kinda try. It does actually contain music from the movie, which even most movie-to-game adaptations that I really like Terminator 2 and Jurassic Park, didn't do. And it does have a lot of characters from the movie in roles you would expect, like Jarrett is in the beginning, though his dialogue is pared down to the most basic version of solve the labyrinth or you lose kind of speech. The little worm shows up occasionally to give you advice. Apparently, Hoggo, Ludo, and Sir Didymus show up at some point. This screen makes it look like you can switch between the characters at some point, but I don't know how that works. Other than that, it's semi-Zelda looking as you run around getting perpetually gang-raped by multiple fairies. I know the movie establishes that they aren't nice, but why are they so fucking aggressive all of a sudden? Also, you can throw some kind of projectile. I assume it's rocks, but it doesn't look like anything in particular in the game. It could be that this game isn't as bad as my first impression is letting on. I know there are guides on how to play it, but I don't really have the patience to bother to learn. My first impression tells me that it's not that great, even if it does have some neat little nods to the movie, so enough of that. More recently, from 2006 to 2010 in fact, Tokyopop released a 4-part graphic novel called Return to Labyrinth, which is obviously a sequel. I have to admit, with how fantastic the cover art is, I was a little disappointed in the artwork within. I guess I didn't consider that the covers were done by a different artist than the actual pages. And since it's manga style, it would be in black and white with screen toning. I guess I've been spoiled by the Dark Tower graphic novels. And you know, when adapting a movie with these kinds of visuals, I just had high expectations. The general plot is that it takes place 13 years after Labyrinth and is centered around Toby, who is now a teenager. Meanwhile, Jarrett, who is on the verge of losing his throne soon, names Toby as his heir and has goblins secretly following him around all his life and doing things for him. Toby takes after his sister and is kind of a brat, but to be fair, his family life isn't that great. Remember Sarah's evil stepmother from the movie? She's actually kind of a really bad mom in this. Basically, Toby has become a daydreamer like Sarah was in the movie, and after being lured into the labyrinth and making friends, he's not sure he wants to go back. But at the same time, he knows that he should, and he definitely doesn't want to be a ruler. Either option involves taking responsibility, which creates an interesting conundrum. I have to admit that I wasn't sure if I'd be able to get into this at first. Volume 1 felt kind of rough to me. I found Toby kind of annoying, though again, to be fair, Sarah was pretty annoying in the beginning of the movie. The artwork contains some manga tropes that feel a little out of place for a Labyrinth sequel for me. Like, Toby has spiky hair and there's a whole lot of screen toning. And it's not used really well either. It feels like it's being used to distract from subpar artwork sometimes, which is kind of a rookie mistake that aspiring manga artists sometimes make. But it does get better, and as of Volume 2, I found myself really getting into it. And even though I feel like the artwork could be better, as I've said recently, the story is interesting enough that I didn't mind after a while. Also, at one point, Toby does run into Sarah's friends from the movie, and they discover that she never told Toby about them. And Hoggle remarks, "I guess she just didn't need us." Ouch. Also, Jarrett apparently took Sarah's rejection kind of hard, as Volume 2 goes back in time to shortly after it happened when he's having a nightmare about it. Going by the look on his face when it happened, I can't say that surprises me too much. I'm gonna stop at the second volume as far as describing it here, but I did read all 4, and I will say that the ending is pretty satisfying. It isn't great overall, but it's pretty good and worth a read if you're a fan of the movie. There is one more bit of merchandise that was widely available from the beginning, and even though it's a bit flawed, I do recommend it. The soundtrack, which I probably still have on cassette tape somewhere. My only complaints are that, for some reason, they changed the beginning of Dance Magic.
You remind me of the babe. You remind me of the babe.
And they added fake baby noises, which doesn't totally ruin it, but it's kind of unnecessary. Especially since Toby stopped making any noise as soon as the song started in the movie, and it's just kind of distracting. It's amusing to note that those noises were made by David Bowie, though.
So I ended up doing the gurgles, so I'm the baby on that track as well. I thought, what the hell, I've done Laughing Gnome. I might as well cut all the way.
Also, this cool tune that I commented on earlier. Not to mention the music that plays during the fight between Ludo and Sir Didymus. Seems to be missing. On the upside though, Chili Down has an extra verse.
When the sun goes down, when the sun goes down, and the bands are back to dance.
And this is neither good nor bad, I just think it's interesting. The music that leads into the song that plays during the ballroom scene is separated from it, so it has Hallucination and As the World Falls Down as 2 different tracks. Again, not a bad thing, I just think it's interesting. But that's it, the rest is straight out of the movie as I recall, and this movie has amazing music, and I definitely recommend the soundtrack. Well, I guess that's all I have to say about Labyrinth. I know you've probably seen it by now, but if you haven't, please go watch it. You owe it to yourself, and the movie just deserves it. That's it for now, see you next time.
If she ever kisses you, I'll turn you into a prince.
You will?
Prince of the land of stench.